Welcome to this special episode of CP Newswatch. I'm Kathleen Harris, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Canadian Press. It has been a chaotic presidential campaign in the United States, and Donald Trump is set to take office on Monday. After winning the election 2 months ago, Trump wasted no time in jumping into the spotlight with provocative statements, suddenly dropping them on social media. Canada has become a key target, with Trump threatening to slap crippling tariffs on all Canadian imports. He has also mused repeatedly about Canada becoming the 51st state. So where is all this headed, and how will things unfold on Inauguration Day next week? Let's head to the U.S. Capitol, where our Washington correspondent, Geraldine Malone, has all the details. Hey, Kelly.
Hi.
Big week ahead.
An exhausting week that hasn't even begun yet.
So we're just a few days away from Trump officially becoming president once again. What's the mood like there in D.C.?
In D.C., it's a strange town. That's how I describe it to people. It's a lot of political staffers or longtime residents that are affiliated with lobby groups or political parties. And so, for the past 4 years, it's been a lot of Democrats in general. It's a Democrat town. So that brings a sense probably of anxiety to some of the people here. And then there's also just general disdain for how this will impact our ability to use the metro and drive around the city and get to places we need to go, because the fences are already being erected. The security perimeter is already going up. There's also some excitement, obviously. I think any presidential election brings people who are coming with a new administration, new ideas, excitement for what the 4 years for them holds.
So let's talk a little bit about that anxiety that you talked about. As I mentioned in the intro, Canada has borne the brunt of a lot of Trump's, dropping these little things, bombs on social media, the tariffs, the 51st state thing. So what are we expecting?
As Canadians, I think that we are expecting the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. There's really no sense right now what we will see on January 20th. You mentioned his social media post from November. That was pretty quick after the election. He made the claim that he was going to put 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico unless they dealt with the border. Obviously, in response to that, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau went to Mar-a-Lago. Then they came back and they made a billion-dollar border plan. And that doesn't seem to appease Trump in any capacity. He's, if anything, doubled down on his rhetoric against Canada. As you mentioned, making jabs at Trudeau about being a governor, saying that he was going to take Canada by economic force. And then, just very recently saying he was going to create a department called the External Revenue Agency to collect tariffs. So that doesn't give a very good sign, probably, for what is to be expected for Canada on January 20th. But ministers from Canada have been circling in and out of Washington. They are here all of the time. And they've said that from Republicans that they've been meeting, they're not getting a whole lot of indication. They've heard kind of 3 different things for tariffs: 25%, 10%, or kind of a sliding scale that starts lower and then goes up if there's not the action that Donald Trump wants to see. So everyone's got a bit of bated breath to see what happens. Essentially, what will be the main sign is on Inauguration Day, it's been reported that Trump has up to 100 executive orders that he's intending to sign. If one of those declares a national emergency, a national economic emergency, experts say that's a sign that the tariffs are coming, because he will use that in order to enact it under his powers as president. There could also just be one that is straight up about tariffs. So I think really until we start seeing what's in these executive orders, Canadians just aren't going to know.
A lot of people wondering, can he actually do this? I mean, don't we have trade agreements that enshrine in law that we can't just impose 25% tariffs across the board against our trade partners?
Well, I was actually talking with experts this week about it, and last week, kind of catching up before we go into Inauguration Day of just where Canada stands. Some say, obviously, The Canada-US-Mexico agreement was renegotiated under Trump's first administration. It was a thing he held up as one of his great achievements as president, and they're shocked to see that he would do something that seems to be contrary to the agreement that he replaced NAFTA with. Others are saying, obviously, within this agreement and in most trade agreements, there is kind of a loophole that allows for any partner to take actions in their national security. And so that's why people are looking for him to declare an emergency. There's been reporting that it'll be an economic emergency, and that'll be for national security. So under his powers as president, he can put tariffs in place if they're related to national security. So if he declares an emergency, then it kind of becomes a national security issue. And most of the people I spoke with say that it's really up to the trade partners themselves to define what is a national security issue. So despite it really being against the gentleman's agreement of a trade deal of what we really think it is, there might be some loopholes within it. I would caution that industry in the United States does have the capacity, and private groups and people, to do court challenges against an executive order. So it doesn't mean like it goes in and that's just it. There's also the opportunity in the United States for industries like the automobile industry that will also be decimated if 25% tariffs impact them, that they could call for a judicial review, bring this to court. It just means that that'll take time.
So, using the national emergency explanation or justification works when he was talking about border security and, problems with drugs and migrants flowing across the border. But now he seems to have pivoted and he's talking more about a trade deficit with Canada. So how can he justify the tariffs based on that?
It'll be interesting to see exactly how that kind of builds up in a court of law. People said when it was about the border, this was about drugs, this was about illegal immigration, there was a pretty good case. It was going to be a hard fight in court for anyone who's trying to go against it. But now, obviously, his justifications are expanding. But you look at aluminum and steel and the tariffs he's previously put on those were also for national security reasons, saying that, he needed it to build up supply for their national security purposes so that they could, maintain their security. Obviously, I think most people see it as, no, that was probably not the root cause of it, but it was the justification. So if he is, making the justification that the American economy is being damaged and it's not allowing them to, serve their best interests, that's probably what you would hear in court if there were challenges. But it is a little bit of the loosey-goosey nature of some of these trade agreements that we just expected people to follow for a long time. And I think when Trump entered the fray, like even in 2017, it opened up a new world about the future of these kinds of agreements and specifically America's place in them.
Mm-hmm. We should note that we are recording this on Thursday, a day after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with all the premiers. They seem to be very united, with the exception of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, taking a united approach and vowing to retaliate with other measures from Canada. Do you think that's going to make Trump think twice about imposing these tariffs?
It'll be interesting to see. I think famously Trump said tariff is his favorite word in the dictionary. Some economists say that he might not fully comprehend the impacts that these tariffs will have on the American economy. Others say he knows. He knows that there'll be suffering for certain communities, certain industry, certain states that their number one export market is Canada. And that's the expectation is long-term gain. Previous economic advisors that he's had, specifically Robert Lighthizer, in his book really makes the argument for tariffs as a way to get money for the American budget. That was his strategy. He's not in this administration now. His protege is leading the USTR, the United States Trade Representative Office. So obviously his ideas are still on there, and his ideas are all throughout a lot of the Project 2025 and Trump agenda stuff. So there is an idea of them using tariffs to pay down deficit, to get revenue as part of a strategy. With steel and aluminum, what they kind of did was not steel and aluminum, sorry, with tariffs that in the first administration they put against China that had a huge impact on a lot of farmers. And so what they ended up doing was kind of this huge, billion-dollar bailout plan to help farmers. So in a capacity, it's like, if you're helping them survive, to what extent does the tariff revenue become more than what you're spending to help farmers? I think when you see a tariff that's 25% against Canada and Mexico, the revenue you're getting versus what you might have to spend to bail out the auto industry, to help farmers needing potash from Saskatchewan, to help the Midwest that needs Alberta's oil. If you have to start bailing out those communities so that they can make it through the suffering of tariffs, I'm not sure the revenue you would get through this scheme would make it work out.
Might make Trump look good for the next 4 years, though, and then the problem becomes the next president's problem. So what are we expecting on the ground on Monday? Obviously, a lot of pomp and circumstance. What are you expecting to see? What Canadians are going to show up for the event?
I think it will be my first in-person inauguration. So there is, for me personally, a real sense of excitement of being there at this moment of history. Because, there's not a whole lot of people in the world who get to experience something like this. And as the Canadian Press Washington correspondent, I get to be there on the ground. I get to see the parade. I get to see the red hats on the National Mall. And I'm not sure what that feeling is going to be like, but I'm excited that I will have that feeling because it is certainly an amazing experience. The day is kind of very much ceremonial. He will go to Capitol Hill. He will do the signing. Then he will go and he'll do his inauguration address. I think a lot of people are waiting to see what that happens. His 2017 inaugural address, he quoted American carnage, and it was considered really dark. Even George W. Bush, famously, it's been reported that he turned to his side and said, "That's some weird expletive word," about what Trump said. So I think people are looking of, will he take a different tone in his speech? It'll also be interesting to see what world leaders are going to be there, because he has put out invites to people that usually you wouldn't have coming to this. Usually it's a domestic affair with maybe someone's ambassador or something like that there, but not the leader themselves. I know Xi Jinping in China has said he's not going, but Viktor Orban from Hungary has indicated he is. When it comes to Canadians, a lot of them, a few are certainly going on the Canadian government's behalf to the inauguration address, but a lot are going to the Canadian Embassy because it is located on Pennsylvania Avenue between Capitol Hill and the White House. So it is honestly a place people want to go because you can see everything and also be inside and warm because it's supposed to be very cold that day. And there you are really seeing Danielle Smith. You're seeing Premier Fury. You're going to see MPs out of Ontario. There's a couple ministers coming out from there. There is people from business groups, lobby groups, and sponsorships for it really range from, Google and Netflix to other organizations. So they say it's going to be the tailgate party to be at is at the Canadian Embassy on January 20th.
Wow. Sounds like an interesting day shaping up. Thanks very much, Kelly.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Kathleen Harris, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Canadian Press.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. For more of today's top stories, visit thecanadianpressnews.ca.